Well, good afternoon. Today we're in Psalm 143, and it's a great psalm. And David makes a number of petitions to the Lord, that is in prayer. Beginning in verse number 1, David approaches God by asking him to hear his prayer. Have you ever wondered if God really is listening, that he will answer your prayer, that you have confidence that he will? One of the great verses in the New Testament is in Hebrews chapter 4, in verse number 16, where the Hebrew writer said, "Let us come boldly to the throne that we might find mercy and grace in time of need." Notice he says that we ought to come boldly, that is, with confidence. Now, let me give you a warning. He does not mean presumptuously. If we approach God presumptuously as if he owes us something, that's going to rule out prayer. But if we go with a humble petition and with confidence, believing that God will answer our prayer, the Bible says that he will. Now, in the psalm, he's asking God to hear his prayer. And as he continues, he'll say, "Give ear to my supplication in thy faithfulness." That is, you can trust him. Answer me according to thy righteousness. Now, in verse number 2, and it's a very important verse, and I want you to pay close attention to it, because he says, uh, "Enter not into judgment with thy servant." In other words, if one goes into the court of judgment, that is the judgment of God, he has no hope of winning because he's not innocent. And that's important to understand here. The writer is not claiming to be innocent or that God owes him anything, because if he was to go into the court of God, he would find himself guilty without any hope. And that's why he's asking not to enter into judgment. I'll tell you something. We're blessed to know that God is a God of mercy and grace. And the reason that he can be just in this is because of Jesus. That, and not only that, just let me throw another verse in for just a moment, because in First John chapter 2, the Bible teaches us that we have an advocate, that is one who goes to our side, who's at our defense, and that advocate is Jesus Christ. And so we can go to prayer with great confidence in the Lord. Now, the petition has to do with David is having so much trouble. It's always being surrounded by enemies. It just seems to be one turmoil after another. And yet, I want you to see that in verse number 3, and I have to be quickly here, but in verse number 3, he begins to talk about the enemy, how they are relentless and how they pursue him and how they persecute, always under some kind of pressure. As a matter of fact, in verse 5, David begins to reminisce about the old days and the days of old when I meditate on all my works. And he's talking about, I remember those days when there wasn't so much strife, when life seemed to be so much simpler. But notice here in verse 7, going back to the prayer, he says, "Hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth." I mean, just think how discouraged he is right now. "Hide not thy face from me." In other words, God, answer my prayer, lest I be like them that go down into the pit or the grave. "Cause me thy loving kindness," he says, "in the morning, for in thee do I trust." Isn't that a tremendous prayer? Because me to know, he says, "the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee." And so he's asking God for guidance. He's asking God for protection. He's asking God for deliverance. And he's right down at the bottom, as far down as you can get. And he's probably praying to God for God to help. And I think sometimes we're in that situation, aren't we? And yet, you see, we need to go to God in prayer, and God is the answer. And let me just say it this way: there are some things in life that only God can fix, and don't forget that. So we'll continue our study in the book of Psalms, and we'll be getting close to the end beginning next week. And by the way, hope to see you Sunday morning at worship. See you then. Take care now.